Hello and welcome to Sound Advice Live for another show packed with independent reviews from experts on the kind of kit that you might be thinking about buying, but you might be a bit hesitant or nervous about making the decision. But hesitate no more, because we've got all the experts here. So just pop your questions into the chat box on YouTube. Michelle is in the chat waiting for your questions, and we'll pass them through to the studio and we will get the experts to answer them. So if you have any questions about the kit we're talking about, feel free to pass them through. Firstly, though, on today's show, I need to say a big thank you to you, because we are, and I haven't checked the YouTube channel just in the last few minutes, but we are very close to hitting the 250,000 views mark, and that's all down to you. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much if you've been watching these items on CatUp. And of course, that's where you'll find all the items we're doing today. So if you missed something or want to go back and review it again, you will find it on the YouTube channel, and Michelle has a link to that to drop into the chat for you as well. So we're pretty excited to be bringing you more on AV receivers as well, because last time our item on AV receivers had about 23,000 hits on YouTube. So we've got more of those for you today. And remember, you can schedule a free call with any of our experts. If there's something that you're not sure whether it's right for you, then chat to somebody about it. So today, as well as the AV receivers, we've got a soundbar for you to look at. We've got, well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about one of the best reviewed televisions, OLED televisions, that I've ever heard about. And also, we've got some headphones for you. In fact, we've got a battle of the headphones for you, and the controversial question of whether special editions are worth the extra money. So let us know in the chat whether you ever splurge a little extra on a special edition of something, and if so, why? So Bowers & Wilkins is one of the best known British brands of audio, and you probably know them for speakers, but they're no slouch when it comes to headphones either. Not so long ago, they introduced two very capable wireless noise cancelling headphones into their range. We've got the PX7S2s, they're £379, and they were closely followed by the PX8s, which are £599. Now, there's been a good deal, I think, of spirited debate in the Sound Advice reviewing team on whether the PX8s are worth the 58% extra price tag that they bring with them. So with me in the blue corner is Ed Selly, and in the red corner is Simon Lucas. Now, Ed is going to be putting up the fight for the PX7s, which I suppose in this case you could call the base model, although I think the base for Bowers & Wilkins is pretty high. And Simon is going to be giving a shout out to the PX8s. So thank you both for joining me. I think,
thank you. Firstly,
we're going to hand over to Ed and say, right, why would you be happy to stick with the PX7s?
The first reason is that the PX7S2 is extremely good. I've spent time with both headphones, and I'm writing this. I'm saying this from having the perspective of having written the PX8 review for Sound Advice. It's not that I don't think that the PX8 doesn't have any virtues over the PX7S2, but it does come down to those price differences that you mentioned just now. I think that they are relatively high, and the brute point is that Bowers & Wilkins really did pull out the stops for the S2. I was really genuinely impressed at how much of a step forward it was over the original PX7. And something else that I think is going to sort of play heavily into the considerations here, and I do say this as someone who is not an iPhone user, but I do use iPads on a regular basis with the same Bluetooth fitment. One of the things that has to be taken into account right from the start, and I did say this in the PX8 copy, is if you are an iPhone user, they are tremendous devices, but in Bluetooth terms, they're not the most sophisticated objects on the market. I would say if you are, especially if you are part of the Apple ecosystem, the limiter is going to be the performance of that Apple device. And some of the bells and whistles of the PX8 simply aren't going to make themselves felt when you use the more sophisticated headphone with them. Under those circumstances, in particular, the PX7S2 is exceptionally good, and it is not going. The PX8 is not going to demonstrate the clear air that I think it can do potentially under some other circumstances. Being generous for a moment.
Okay, so we've heard the shout for the PX7s. I want a good clean fight, gents, please. Simon, why would you say the PX8s are worth the more than £200 extra?
Well, they are like the PX7S2, but more so, basically. I think Ed's point that if you're an iPhone user, that the PX8 are kind of hamstrung by that is true, but equally, I'm not sure if any of us would recommend spending £600 on a pair of headphones in order to drive them with a smartphone. But but nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. The Bowers and Wilkins has taken what is a very successful design with the PX7S2 and in tremendous good taste has tarted it up somewhat. See my diamond cut ear plates here. See how they catch the light. Smell my Napa leather. Well, smell my Napa leather up to a point. The arms now are cast aluminium, which is an improvement on the fairly ordinary looking composite that the PX7S2 used. And then on the inside, there's a new 40mm carbon dome driver, which is based on Bowers and Wilkins' very successful carbon dome tweeter, which it's deployed in its new 700 series, which one of us will be reviewing for Sound Advice soon, I'm sure. They perform brilliantly. They are an incremental improvement on PX7S2, certainly, but they're an improvement nevertheless. And then an improvement in aesthetic terms as well, even though if you saw them side by side, they're very similar looking until you start to examine them. £600 is not an inconsiderable sum of money for headphones, and I say that as someone who routinely deals with headphones that are much more expensive than that. But I think, and you have to kind of make the point here for yourself, 380 quid on a pair of PX7S2s is money well spent. But if you can justify to yourself £600 for some headphones and you're not going to be driving them using an iOS smartphone, then yeah, they make perfect sense. They're as good as anything you'll hear for this sort of money.
And I have to admit, I cannot smell your Napa leather from here. I think I'm quite glad about that, Simon, to be honest.
You say that.
But we trust you. We trust you. And they do look very nice. And I have to say, you're coming across loud and clear on the show. And I hope you're enjoying us in lush audio in both of your ears in the PX8.
Well, indeed I am. I can't help but notice that Ed's not wearing his PX7S2s. I'm not sure what kind of advocate that makes you.
I gave the samples back to Bowers and Wilkins because I mean it's also worth pointing out that
I never give
in terms of being a keen recycler, something else that may or may not swing people's decisions on this is I do agree that the material quality of the PX8 is better. I do think, however, that Bowers and Wilkins has missed a trick insofar as there is no animal-free option on the PX8, where the PX7 is entirely animal-free. Now, cards to the table, this is not a consideration for me. My sofa is made out of cow, and so is my coat. So, but nevertheless, it was interesting on occasions where I have discussed these materials in places where you get user feedback. There is always a quotient of people who are annoyed at the use of animal product in 2022. So I do think that Bowers may have. I think it would have been a neat option if they'd also had one animal-free variant of the PX8 as well. But the PX7S2 is, of course, entirely animal-free.
So PX7 for the vegan-friendly option. Now, I said in the beginning that they are both wireless headphones, as we can clearly see, with Simon modelling the PX8s, and that they're also both noise-cancelling. The noise-cancelling, does it work exactly the same on both models? And does that affect the enjoyment of the music at all? Does it work really well with music, or is it just for use on aircraft and things like that?
Oh, it's the same system. It's my understanding that PX7S2 and the PX8 use exactly the same algorithms for noise cancelling, and it's very effective. Some noise cancelling systems can affect the sound of the headphones, and it's a noticeable difference in the way they perform when you switch it on and then you switch it off. But that's not the case with these, and it's very effective as far as noise cancelling goes as well. It is only on or off, and for this sort of money, it's possible you might expect a degree within the app to sort of trim the amount of noise cancelling you're getting so that you're not in danger of being hit by a bus or anything. But once it's on, it works really well, and it doesn't make a difference to the sound of either pair of headphones, which are very competitive.
That's good to hear, that it doesn't introduce any artifacts into the sound by using the noise cancelling, which is excellent. Ed, how do they integrate with the B&W Music app? Does that all work smoothly?
Extremely well. Yes, it is pretty smooth. The caveat to the Bose Music app is that if you just own a pair of Bose headphones, it feels massively over the top. The whole purpose of the Music app is to tie together a family of Bose & Wilkins products. So unlike almost any other wireless headphone on the market, you have to set up a user ID and have a password and other gubbins just to actually make EQ adjustment and noise cancelling adjustments on your PX7S2 or PX8. But the whole idea is that in the fullness of time, you can stroll to the front door of your house and the music will disconnect from your headphones and start playing on your other Bose & Wilkins device. Whether it actually ever works as slick as that will be something that we can watch from a safe distance. But they have taken the very, very bold move, because it's not a small thing to do. You can now access streaming services within the app. Within the Bose app, rather than going to the streaming service app and making a connection through the standard Bluetooth settings on your phone. When it works, and it does work most of the time, it does feel slick, it feels cohesive, it feels that the time and effort has gone into it. But there's no getting around the fact that if you've just bought one pair of headphones, when you compare it to what Philips is doing, what Sennheiser is doing, what Mark Levinson is doing at an even higher price point than the PX8, it just feels a little bit more intrusive by necessity of it potentially being able to control more than just the headphones. But it does work well in itself once it is set up.
Excellent, and that applies equally to the PX7 and PX8, I assume.
Yes, absolutely.
But just coming back to the aesthetics, one more, because we are nearly out of time on this. You haven't come to blows over the PX7 and PX8 yet. You've put forth a very gentlemanly argument, if I may say so. But Simon, another £100 for the 007 limited edition Midnight Blue. Really? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to reserve judgment on this because I haven't seen them. I've seen the pictures. Obviously, there's got a little red button. That's always exciting, right? And they're blue, which would, I don't know, match my overcoat. But I mean, a limited edition is always a bit of it depends, really. If it's just aesthetic, then I can't imagine that they can possibly be worth the extra money. But then I'll see a pair, and then maybe I'll be swept off my feet by how blue they are and how red their button is. But it's a bit like buying LPs and paying extra because this one is on white vinyl instead of black. Do you know what I mean? One presumes these are the same headphones that have been mildly tarted up.
And yet we know a lot of people who would pay more for an album on white vinyl instead of black, and it becomes a collector's item, right?
In theory, I suppose, yeah. I mean, people collect headphones, I realise that. But me personally, I struggle with it. No, if I spend less money on the black LP, that means I've got more money left to buy more black LPs, doesn't it?
And
I'm afraid there's not going to be any disagreement from me. No. Every once in a great while, I mean, I have, as it's sort of known I have something of a trainer fixation, and I have been known to spend curious sums of money on very specific colorways. But then equally, there are a committed group of lunatics who will pay me handsomely to then take those off my hands later on. So it's not that thing. In the case of electronics, paying more for a color variation, especially when it's a deviation from what is actually a very nice set of colors available from the base model anyway. I say base model, the standard PX8. And also, I'm not that much of a fan of Bond, although I know that Mr. Withers will appear on this podcast a little bit later on, and he would buy 007 themed underpants, so he might be the person that you need to bring that up with later on. So, it must be said that there is a Bond cachet that some people will go for in a big way. I don't think that Bose is going to struggle to sell these. I need to be clear on that.
Then I shall ask Mr. Withers later on, because he's here with some reviews as well. But in the meantime, thank you both very much for your reviews on the PX7 and PX8 Bose & Wilkins headphones. But Ed, don't run off, because I need you to come back in just one moment and talk to us about getting streaming right without overcomplicating things. So every Sound Advice reviewer agrees that performance is the most important aspect of any piece of kit, and we all strive to recommend the best possible models for you here on Sound Advice Live, because as you know, we're not paid for reviews and we can say whatever we like about the bits of kit. But what differs between the experts is their approach to getting the best out of a setup or out of a piece of kit. So for some, they like to tweak to the nth degree, explore every bit of every menu. Some people delight in seeing if they can get a system, plug it together and make it work. So today we're looking at if we can push that convenience angle a little bit. So Ed is back with us to look at the Roxanne Atessa streaming amplifier with Monitor Audio Silver 107G, wait for it, limited edition speakers, which sells for about £2,300 in total. It's sort of a does-it-all compact stereo music system. So Ed, before we even talk about the rest of the music system and whether it's easy to put together or not, here we are with another limited edition, green speakers.
Yes, we are. And they are very green. I need to be very clear about this. There's not sort of, a whiff of green. They are extremely green. And then there's a bronze driver and the very trademark Monitor Audio gold tweeter. They are £100 more than the standard version of the speaker, so it seems to be £100 is the going rate for a special edition on this podcast. So these are £900 as opposed to £800. I will say, when I saw the photos, I thought they would be truly awful. Actually, I don't mind them, and people who have passed through the house since they've been set up, some people have been extremely enthusiastic about them. So, you pay your money, you take your choice. I would say that they are quite determinedly different, and if you're fed up with the more standard sort of colorways and swatches that speaker companies seem to fall into a sort of pit of security on, this is an awful lot more convincing, an awful lot more interesting to look at. It does help that the speaker itself is fundamentally sound. Monitor Audio purchased the Roxanne brand a number of years ago, and it's really only now, with the launch of this Atessa streaming amplifier and the rest of the Atessa family, that these are Roxanne devices that have been developed under the Monitor Audio umbrella. And this is the first time that I have sat down and listened to the Roxanne being used with speakers that must have featured in the things that were being used when it was developed. And it really does show. I would argue that the amplifier is a good one. I have tested it with a number of other speakers in the past, and it works extremely well. We'll come to its functionality in just a moment. But the combination with the Monitor Audio speakers is extremely convincing. I've been really impressed at the balance between it being able to be big, fast, exciting, but then it's pleasantly refined. I can play some of my more dreadful music on it and it doesn't complain in any way, shape or form. It's really, really quite cohesive, and it does show that there is often a benefit to be had from looking at the relationships between electronics and speaker companies, and at the very least giving that an audition, because there is a house sound and a partnership here which is very clearly working, and it's extremely effective.
Now, an awful lot of people would just go out and buy an entire system from one brand, because then they would have the peace of mind that everything would play nicely together. They wouldn't have any compatibility issues, and that hopefully the bits of kit were optimized to work with each other. And I completely understand that reticence, but I also understand being able to go for the best speakers, the best amp, put them together. So what advice would you give somebody who's maybe doing this for the first time, this more mix and match approach?
First time out, it really does pay to listen to what your dealer is saying. Obviously, you can take some of the advice that we give here under consultation, and obviously look at what other partnerships people are using in systems that are posted online. As you become more sure of what your room does, what your preferences are, then this is where separates come into their own, because you can start to tweak, you can start to polish the cannonball and really optimize the sort of performance that you're looking for. If you are, in particular, if you have quite tight preferences in terms of the genres of music that you listen to, it becomes possible to choose equipment that with a degree of exactitude that allows you to really dial in on that, and it's an unbeatable feeling when you get it right. But then we're in a position in 2022 that more equipment plays nicely with more other equipment than I think has ever been the case before. It is quite hard to choose a partnership, which is truly dreadful. So you can be reasonably confident, but first time out, I'd take a lean from what the dealer and what other people are saying. Even as if you just take that as a starting point of things to listen to and tweak from there, it pays to at least have a line in the sand to begin from.
So the Roxanne amp and the Roxanne Atessa amp and the monitor speakers do play nicely together. Is it a nice, uncomplicated setup to put in a room? What size room would you put it in?
It's extremely uncomplicated to put together. Roxanne has licensed the Blue OS streaming platform, which was developed by Lembrook, which is the company that also owns NAD. Blue OS is just a watchword for stability, reliability, and user friendliness. It means that you don't need any source equipment if you don't want. The amplifier is perfectly capable of being parked on a network, whereupon it will either access your music on a hard drive if you have, or a NAS drive if you have it available, or you can simply log into one of, and I'm not exaggerating on this, about 20 to 22 different streaming services. And yes, there are that many, and simply access content from there, all through a control app which works exceptionally well. It is a watchword for stability, logic, and user friendliness. What's neat is that Roxanne hasn't then just gone long on the Blue OS. There's plenty of other inputs, digital and analog. It's perfectly capable of taking an optical signal from a television, for example. There's a very, very good phono stage in there as well for connecting a turntable, and indeed there is a turntable in the Atessa range, which is one of the more fun and innovative bits of equipment I've tested at a semi-affordable price in the last couple of years. So it's a really lovely balance between being utterly unintimidating to get set up as it is, but it's perfectly capable of growing and expanding with you and making use of other equipment that you have as and when you choose to do so. A number of manufacturers who may think that they have this sort of thing down pat could do worse than have a look at how neatly it's been done here, because it really is a lovely balance between instant user friendliness and long-term flexibility, and I'm genuinely impressed by it.
Well, that's really good to know that this uncomplicated choice can be added to with a good amount of confidence later on. And as you said, it can handle all kinds of music. You've thrown all kinds of music at it, haven't you? And it's behaved rather well. So that sounds like a really good stable basis to start your can we call it a pick and mix system? Is that acceptable jargon in the hi-fi world?
It pays not to be too precious about these things. Essentially, yes. The whole joy of it, it's like a Jedi building a lightsaber, to do a tenuous Star Wars reference. You pick the whole thing. It's done for you. but don't be afraid to use pre-existing combinations, because most of the reason why they're pre-existing combinations is because they work. So you can be as bold or as cautious as you see fit, and broadly speaking, the equipment available will do a fine job of adjusting to suit.
Ed, thank you very much. I haven't bought a lightsaber lately, but if I do, you'll be the first person I call before I do that. Thank you very much indeed for your review of the amp and speakers there. And next up, we are talking soundbars. So let us know in the chat if you are a soundbar convert or if you wouldn't part with your surround sound speakers for anything. So joining me now to talk home cinema audio is Steve Withers. Steve, what have you been testing this time?
Well, this time I've been testing the Philips Fidelio FB1 soundbar, which is their latest soundbar. In fact, it's so new that I think I'm the first person in the country to see it, or at least that's what they told me. And I've got to say, very impressed. I'll start with the outer looks before I get on to the inner beauty, but this is a stylish looking soundbar. It's got a metal mesh grille across the front, the top and the sides, and a very attractive leather trim as well. And it's finished in black, so it will sit under your TV without drawing attention to itself. Although, if you do want to draw attention to itself, it does have ring lights around the upward firing speakers on the top. Now, these can be turned off, but they do look quite cool, and obviously they come on when you're listening to something that's got a Dolby Atmos or a DTS:X soundtrack with overhead channels, so that way at least you can quickly see if you're getting the full signal that you want to be receiving. So that's quite a nice touch. There's also a front display, although because the display is behind the mesh grille, it can be quite tricky to read sometimes. That's one criticism on my part. It's claimed to be a 7.1.2 channel system, although I should stress that actually inside the soundbar there are 5.1.2 speakers, composed of 15 drivers, and all this is driven by 310 watts of amplification. So when I say 5.1.2, what I mean is that there are front, left and right and center speakers, there are 2 side firing speakers, there are 2 upward firing speakers, which basically bounce sounds off the ceiling to create the overhead channels. And there's also 2 built-in woofers, which do the low frequency, the 0.1 aspect of the audio. So there's no separate subwoofer, although this soundbar supports some DTS Play-Fi. So you can use that to create a wireless system with wireless rear speakers and also a wireless subwoofer if you wanted to do that. But I will say that in testing, this soundbar, even though it's a single unit without a separate subwoofer, it goes very deep. The claim is 40 hertz, but I've got to say I thought it was a really impressive deep low bass performance for a single soundbar, which basically means that if you don't want to do the separate subwoofer, or maybe you can't fit it in, or maybe you live in an apartment and don't want to annoy your neighbors, this will deliver a really good bass performance without necessarily going for the separate sub. In terms of its connectivity, it has 2 HDMI, 1 input and 1 output, and these are HDMI 2.0B, which basically means that they will pass 4K, they will support all versions of HDR, so HDR10, HDR10+, HLG and Dolby Vision, but what they don't support are 4K 120, VRR and ALM. So if you're a gamer, you're going to be better off connecting your games console directly to the TV and then sending the audio to the soundbar via EARC. So you'll still get the full audio, but don't connect it into the input because you'll lose some of your gaming features if you do that. It supports Dolby Atmos, DTS:X and IMAX Enhanced, so that's most of the immersive audio formats. And it's got other connectivity as well, which is quite good if you're interested in music, for example. So you've got Bluetooth, Chromecast, and obviously, as I mentioned, Play-Fi, DTS Play-Fi. And there's also Spotify Connect and Apple AirPlay 2. And I've got to say, it's very easy to set up because you can either use Apple AirPlay 2 or you can use a Philips remote control app that actually allows you to set up the soundbar. And there's also a second app which allows you to fine-tune it as well in terms of tweaking the performance. And it comes with a microphone which you can set up and then run an auto EQ system which will actually optimize the soundbar for your particular environment. So I've got to say, it's a really nice package. It's a fantastic performer. I will, perhaps I should just clarify that because obviously it doesn't have actual rear channels unless you buy the optional wireless rear channels, then you won't get the full immersion you would get from a system that has rear channels. But you get a very big, very powerful front soundstage. As I mentioned earlier, you get some really deep bass, and you get very effective overhead channels as well, although the effectiveness of that will depend on what kind of ceiling you've got. So the lower, the flatter, the more reflective it is, the better. If you've got like a vaulted ceiling, this isn't for you, because you're not going to get any overhead channels. So bear that in mind. But I've got to say, for a single unit, this is a stellar performer that delivers really good immersive audio. And also it's got a dedicated center channel, of course, which means you get nice, clear dialogue. And it sounds good with music too, thanks to two really good left and right channel speakers. So overall, I'd say this is a cracking soundbar, and it's £699. It's not going to break the bank.
So it sounds like a good all-round soundbar, but it's got some other really nice features in it. So you said, of course, it doesn't have rear speakers. Well, of course it doesn't, because it's a soundbar and we wouldn't expect them, but it can have it can talk to rear speakers. Is that fairly unusual in the market still at the moment, or are
No,
those really coming out a lot now?
it's pretty common now that most systems are wireless in some way or another. Wireless rears and wireless subwoofers are quite common as an optional add-on. But you can also buy soundbars. For example, the Samson HWQ990B, which is their flagship soundbar, that comes with two wireless rear speakers and a wireless subwoofer. And those two wireless rear speakers have upward firing drivers of their own. So that soundbar actually can deliver a fully immersive 9.1.4 channel system that could stand up against a really good separate system where you're using an AVR, for example. So it's not unusual. Obviously, the big issue is installation, practicality, and price. But this is quite a good approach, because you can buy the soundbar, and if you feel like you need to add the surrounds, and you've got that option later. If you feel like you need a bit more bass, again, you've got that option later. But I think if you're looking for a simple, easy to install single unit solution, this is definitely worth considering.
So in a quite crowded soundbar market, is there any one feature that really makes this soundbar stand out for you?
I definitely think the auto EQ setup with the microphone. That's still relatively unusual. It's becoming more common, but it's a great feature, because obviously it means you can optimize the sound quality to your specific room. And there's definitely, if you turn it on and off, you can hear that the bass is a little tighter, and the actual sound stage is a bit more well defined. So it's definitely a feature that's worth having. And it makes setup really easy, but very effective.
And we often talk about bits of kit, whether they play nicely with other bits of kit. So does this soundbar play nicely with televisions that aren't Philips, for example?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's got, as I said, EARC, so you connect your TV to the soundbar, and what you can do is connect all your devices to the TV, and the audio can be sent back via HDMI to the soundbar. And because it's EARC, if the TV also supports that, you get full lossless audio as well. So as I mentioned, I mean, if you've got a games console, for example, you're really going to have to do that, because if you connect it to the HDMI input on the soundbar, you're going to lose some of your gaming features like VRR and 4K 120. So, but it does play well with other things, yeah, absolutely. And obviously, if you're using a TV with ARC, you can control the volume using the remote control of your TV. It does come with a remote, and as I mentioned, there's also a remote app. But for most people, you can just turn the volume up and down with your TV remote. Makes it nice and simple.
Excellent. So a nice full-featured but uncomplicated soundbar, if you want it to be, at a very, let's say, a non-risky price. You know, you're not really sticking your neck out too far, are you, to buy that soundbar?
No.
So thank you very much indeed, Steve. Don't go away, though, because a bit later in the show, I'm going to be asking you to take a look at some more AV receivers. But thank you very much for looking at that soundbar. And if you're not convinced by soundbars and you want the full surround experience, stay tuned, because, as I said, Steve is back later on with some more sophisticated options for you. So next up, we have maybe Bowers and Wilkins featuring As You May Never Have Seen Them Before. So we've just seen Steve with a Philips soundbar, but now I'd like Bruce to come into the studio and Bruce, you've got to be talking about a television, but with a sound bar, and it's Philips, but it's rather a different package in that sound bar, isn't it?
Certainly is, Angela, and this is an extraordinary setup with both television and, as you say, a built-in soundbar. This is the Philips 65 OLED 937, and everyone's been waiting for this for a long time. It's been a bit slow off the marks to come out. I've been one of the few people, like Steve said about the soundbar, we're one of the few people that have seen this so far. I haven't done the review. I'll point that out straight away, is that John Archer has written a review on the website. And if you haven't had a chance to go and read it, please do, because it's much, much more in depth than I would be able to do. What you're getting is a 60. It comes in two sizes. It's huge. It's 65 or 77 inch. So it's a big beast. And as far as television goes, I would say it's attractive in a minimalist, industrial sort of way. But underneath there, as you can see from that little picture there, underneath there is the sound system, which is a Bowers & Wilkins sound system that is attached to the television itself. You can't just detach it, that's it. It's also a stand, but it has characteristic Bowers & Wilkins features, such as the tweeter on top for the high frequencies. It does work extremely well, I must say. I listened to Blu-ray 4K soundly daft movie called Black Widow from Marvel. Huge amount of action and noise going on. And this, the soundbar with its Dolby Atmos switched on, was really, really impressive. Very, very impressive indeed. I've listened to, and I suppose what the other thing to say is, and we'll come back onto the screen in a minute, but the other thing to say is that for a lot of people who want just one thing to be able to keep themselves entertained, this would do everything. It's fantastic quality image. The sound for the movies and television is fantastically good, but it also plays music. And, you know, I listened to, Ed was saying about his rather peculiar tastes in music, and I listened to some craft work on it, which is certainly not my cup of tea, but it was very, very impressive.
So we've been saying that OLEDs are coming along in their abilities, if you like. There are a lot of them around now. This one is very large, as you say, it comes in two sizes. But what is new about this OLED? Is it the Bowers & Wilkins partnership, or are there other new features on this too?
I think there's two main things, Angela. The Bowers & Wilkins Philips partnerships goes back 2 or 3 years now, but this is by far and away their most successful venture, and they've done it by being able to not try and shoehorn the speakers into the television itself, to take that quite bold step of saying, you know, let's make it a proper sound system and pulling it out of the telly. And, you know, I think it looks better in the flesh than it does in the pictures, is what I would say. It looks a bit clunky sometimes in some of those images we've seen, but in the flesh it looks pretty good, I would think that. The other very important part of it is the new OLED panel. It's called an OLED EX. It's developed by, I've forgotten who, sorry, LG, I think, anyhow. But Philips have said, this is very nerdy, sorry, but Philips have said that they've replaced the hydrogen content within the screen by a compound called deuterium, because it's more stable, it's stronger, and helps reduce vibrations, and tons of other stuff. Now, I'd never heard of deuterium, but I Googled it because I was interested, and apparently it is a compound that was born in the first minutes that followed the Big Bang, when protons and neutrons frantically paired in a 1 million degree primordial soup that became the universe. Now that's a pretty neat thing to be able to drop in a conversation down the pub, isn't it? That my telly goes back billions of years.
Indeed, deuterium and tritium are the main ingredients for fusion. So if you need to do any fusion, should we be
all right,
calling
thank
this a
you very
fusion
much.
television? I don't know. What I do know is that the review by John Archer on the Sound Advice website is a TV review that, like, I don't think I've ever read before. You talked about it being an all-rounder. It is glowing. But he does say that depending on what your preferences are or what you want to use it for, it is really worthwhile delving into the presets, and there are a lot of them. So not necessarily just get out of the box, switch it on and expect it to be your best television, but encouraging you to play with it. Would you agree with John on that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Tellies and Philips is no different to anyone else. Tellies are shipped in something called eco mode, which is sort of, an average of what they think people may want to look at. It's really what people would say is perfect. What the beauty of the Philips one is that the menus, the on-screen menus that you can do to do the fine tuning is extremely simple to do. You don't need someone to do it for you. You can just work through it. You're seeing it happen on screen. There is no right or wrong. It's what you think is the best one. We watched, when I was looking at the telly, we watched a Netflix production called Chef's Table France, which I hadn't seen before, and it's a must for foodies. It's absolutely fantastic. And just excuse me, sorry. The sharpness and the quality of the pictures was absolutely extraordinary. The dishes these guys were making, it almost made you think that escargots were worth it. But I think the brightness of the picture, the image, I've not seen it on telly before, and I mean I've had Philips TVs for the last few years, so I do understand them and I do know them. But this is in a different level altogether.
Talking of
And
brightness, I think we're talking
we,
about in the region of about 1,300 nits. So does that also mean there's a
that's
danger of some burnout?
No, not at all. Part of the system is that it has heat sinks built into it to stop anything like that at all. Just to go back onto Angela, just to go back onto the menus, we tried Dolby Vision, and that has two settings on it, a dark and a bright. And you can see that on the screen as you change it from one to the other, you'll see it on skin tones in particular. You could, to me, my preference was the bright one because it gave a much more natural tone, I suppose, to the skin. I would find, in terms of picture quality and audio quality, I would find it pretty difficult to find anything wrong with it. John made the point that on fast action sequences, for example, the sharpness holds up superbly in the scenes. As I say, we watched Black Widow, which is extremely fast, and you never saw any lag or jitter or anything like that. It was as fast as anything.
And with the Bowers and Wilkins speakers coping with the big noise that goes with that kind of film as well. So we're not looking at distortion,
hugely.
but we're looking at
No,
distinctness and precise sound.
very much so. With the Dolby Atmos, you would certainly sense the height, the width, and that wraparound feel that it delivers. I think one of the other main features that that Philips have had for a few years now is their Ambilight system, where it's an extraordinary situation where you get the light coming out from around onto the walls behind. On the new 937, it's for the first time they've done it on four sides. In the past, it's just come out of the left and right. I don't know what to say about Ambilight, I must say. I enjoy it on my telly at home here. It's nice. It sort of blends into the wall. It makes a picture not look so stark. But I've never really quite got why Philips makes such a big deal of it. It's
Can you switch it off?
It's a nice feature to have rather than being sorry?
Can you switch it off?
Yes, you can switch it off and you can you can have it on bright, vivid, or bonkers, or you can have it on subtle, natural, and it can follow the color of the wall or the color of the television. There's huge amounts of different things it can do. And it is nice, but it's just, they make a huge deal of it, and I've just never quite got it. Maybe that's just me.
I want to try that out now just so I could see a bonkers setting on the TV. But I can almost hear the scratching of pencils, Bruce, as people put it on their Christmas list. We do have to very quickly, because we're nearly out of time, we do have to mention availability.
Yeah, that's the fly in the ointment, I'm afraid. It is, we spent the best part of last week trying to find out where you could go and buy it, or not even buy it, go and demo it, because we would say that's what you must do. And it's really thin on the ground. I spoke to Richer Sounds this morning to see how many stores had it. They said they have it in the warehouse. If the store wants it, they can order it. So there's a bit of a process to go through that. I think the other side of that is that it is the type of TV that we would recommend you go and try in a shop, but don't buy it online. It's you need to understand what you're doing with it and not just take it out of the box and expect it to work.
So it has to be experienced before being bought. Bruce, thank you very much indeed for reviewing the Philips OLED, the 937 OLED television for us. Next up, we're back for more home cinema with Steve Withers. But curiously, just as we're used to prices going up, Steve has some news of prices coming down. So if you want the real movie experience, of course, you're going to need something to support the sound for that. So Steve is back with two options for you. Steve, what have you got for us?
Well, I'll kick off with the Arcam AVR31, which is their flagship AV receiver with an equally flagship price. I don't know what you meant about prices dropping, because this one isn't cheap. It's £5,799. Why is it so expensive? Well, partly because it includes Arcam's Class G amplification. This uses a conventional output stage fed by two power supplies that are introduced according to signal demand. Arcam believes that this approach is smoother, thus avoiding glitching or distortion typically associated with this type of amplification. Basically, what that means is it's very responsive and very powerful. It's also quite pricey. I should stress that whilst the AVR31 can decode 15.1 channels, it only has 7 channels of Class G amplification built in. So if you're looking to do a fully immersive system with more than 7 channels, you're going to have to add additional amplification. To do that, obviously Arcam makes Class G power amps for that very purpose, but that does of course also add to the cost of the system. The 31 is their new flagship, but actually it's been around for a few years now because it was previously the AVR30. The difference between the 30 and 31 is they're both identical, except that the 31 has a new HDMI 2.1 board on it. So you've got HDMI 2.1 inputs and outputs, which basically means that you can now pass 8K, 4K 120, all the HDR formats, VRR, ALM, so all the next-gen gaming features. So if that's something you're interested in or it's important to you, then obviously you're going to need to get the 31. Although if you already own an AVR30, you can pay to have the HDMI board upgraded. So that's still an option for you if you need it. It supports Dolby Atmos, it supports DTS:X, it supports Auro 3D and IMAX Enhanced, so that's every single immersive audio format on the market. It's a pretty stylish looking AVR for, AVRs aren't normally known for their style, but it looks quite nice. It's got a two-tone effect. It's very well made, and it has a large full-color LCD display, which I really like. So that shows you things like, if you're listening to music, it'll show you album art, that kind of stuff. So it looks good. And if you look at the rear, where all the connectivity is, it's surprisingly stripped down. A good approach in my opinion. Keep it simple at the back. It's mostly dominated by HDMI. There's also analog and digital inputs as well, plus obviously the speaker cables. Since it's only got 7 channels, there are only 7 speaker terminals, but obviously there are pre-outs for the other channels if you need them. So it's a well put together AVR. It is actually a receiver. It does have a built-in tune as well if you're still into radio. And I've got to say, I think it's a fantastic performer. unlike, unusually for AVRs, it's a fantastic performer with music as well. So if you're into two-channel, this will not let itself down. It will deliver a great performance. It's got three really large antenna at the back. So obviously it has Wi-Fi, it has Bluetooth, it has Chromecast and Apple AirPlay too. So it's got a full house of streaming methods. And if you're into streaming your music, this will deliver a really great performance. But obviously, I think anyone buying this is really going to be looking at it as the hub for a home cinema system. And in that sense, it's absolutely superb. It has Dirac Live, which means you can EQ the full system, not just for the room, but also for the low end, for the bass, and also to tonally balance all the speakers. And when you're put on something with a really immersive soundtrack, when I tested it, I ran it as a full 9.1.4 system, 9.1.6 system. I ran all 15.1 channels. Obviously, I had to add additional amplification to do that, but I did run it that way, and the results are spectacular. The steering is seamless. The sound stage is just absolutely fantastic. The bass is beautifully integrated, and it's that Class G amplification is really powerful and responsive. So watching something like Midway, which is with the big battle at the end, there is stuff flying all around the room, planes all over the place, explosions going off, flak blowing up in the middle of the air. Fantastic performer. So I mean, it's not cheap, but it definitely delivers the goods.
It's not cheap, but it sounds like you've given it a very good review. And incidentally, I love that on the Sound Advice reviews, at the bottom of the reviews, you let us know what it was you were watching, what you were listening to, and how it was behaving with those things, so that we understand how those features are making themselves known to you, or how those features are special on any one particular piece of kit. Now, as you say, this one is on the pricey side, and when I was talking about prices coming down, I was, of course, referring to the Denon. So can we take a look at that?
Yes, the Denon AVC X8500HA is reducing in price, partly because it's been around for a few years now, and Denon have just launched a new lineup of receivers. However, the fact that it's been around for a while, don't put that against it, because first of all, it's had an upgrade recently. So the full title, X8500HA, so the H bit refers to HEOS, which is Denon's multi-room system. The A refers to the fact that this has got a new HDMI board. So again, like the Arcam, they've added HDMI 2.1. To give you full future-proofing in terms of 8K and 4K 120 and all the next-gen gaming features in the HDR formats. So that's great. It's currently £3,999. Again, not cheap, but cheaper than when it launched. And you might be able to pick up some quite good deals because, as I said, it's approaching the end of its lifespan. This is an absolute beast of a receiver, though. It's got 13.2 channels of processing, and it's got 13 channels built into it. So you can do a full 13.2 channel system right out of the box without adding any additional amplification. It's all in there. It uses Class AB in a monoblock design, and it's really powerful, really responsive, and as I said, a bit of a beast. I mean, it is big and heavy, so bear that in mind if you've got a bad back. Connectivity, like I said, they've added HDMI 2.1, but unlike the Arcam, the back is quite daunting because it's just full of connectivity and analog inputs and digital inputs, and obviously all the speaker terminals for all those channels. But I do think that Denon are quite clever because they color code everything to make it easier to work out what it is you're trying to do and what it is you need to connect. Also, despite it might look intimidating, but the setup wizard that Denon have on their receivers is brilliant because it takes you through the whole process, making setup relatively easy. And also Audyssey EQ, which allows you to, again, use a provided microphone to EQ the entire system for your room, for the bass, and to make sure that all the speakers are tonally balanced. In terms of features, feature-packed, absolutely feature-packed. So you get Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, Auro 3D, IMAX Enhanced, you've got Wi-Fi, you've got Bluetooth, you've got AirPlay 2, it works with Google Assistant, it works with Amazon Alexa. You literally won't find a better specified receiver on the market. Actually, I keep calling it a receiver, but technically it's not, because it doesn't have, the one thing it doesn't have is a tuner. So technically it's an AV amplifier, which is why the code is AVC rather than AVR at the front of the name. But it comes in a choice of black or premium silver, and it is a fantastic AV amplifier. Again, I ran it in a 13.2 system, and it delivered the goods in spectacular style. Really, I mean, one thing I'll say about Denon is that their receivers and amplifiers are incredibly aggressive with soundtracks in a good way. The modern blockbuster soundtracks used to get through a Denon and it sounds amazing. I mean, you've got effects flying all over the place, and it really does bring it all together and orchestrate it in a very controlled and a very precise manner. I've been a big fan of Denon for years, and owned many over the years, and I do think that they make great receivers and amplifiers. And when it was launched, the X8500 was their absolute tip of the top, the best receiver amplifier that they'd ever made. And even though it's a few years old now, it's still a stellar performer.
As for it being a bit of a beast, well, no one said it was a mobile piece of kit. Once it's installed, it's not like it's going anywhere, is it? And obviously, you're not afraid of a bit of wiring if you've had the full system going, and that can sound so spectacular. So if you're not afraid of a bit of wiring and having those speakers arranged around the room, it is a different experience to, for example, a completely different experience, for example, to having the soundbar with the sound bouncing off the ceiling, for example, isn't it? So
absolutely. I mean, when we were talking about the soundbar earlier, I mean, it's amazing what you can get from a soundbar in terms of performance, in terms of immersion. But I should really stress this, nothing beats a proper AV receiver and speaker system with separate subwoofers and actual speakers all around the room. You can kind of fake that with a soundbar, or even add wireless rears to a degree, and create a similar experience. But once you've listened to a properly set up full AV, particularly if you're talking about, say, with the Archammer 15.2 channel system with speakers all over the place and on the ceiling and everything else, that experience, it's like being at the multiplex. You'll never go to the cinema again because you won't need to.
So this one, the Denon, great for home cinema, great for music. How about gaming, Steve?
Like I said, it does support pass-through of all the gaming features. So if you are a gamer, you can connect your console directly to it and then to your display, and you'll still get 4K 120 if you're playing in 120 frames a second. You also get VRR and ALM support. So it's very good for gamers. If you want to game immersive gaming in Dolby Atmos, fantastic. And you'll still get all the other benefits that you want. So it's a great all-rounder if you're a gamer. If you like music, if you're a film fan, this receiver, I keep calling it, this amplifier won't let you down.
And you said to keep an eye on the price. So with the Black Friday deals coming up and then post-Christmas, do you think a bargain could be had here?
Yeah, I definitely think that as the new Denon amplifiers and receivers start to hit the shelves over the next month or so, the end of this month, now we're into November, so the end of, tomorrow's November, isn't it? The end of November will definitely be a chance to pick up some bargains. And I think, if you do see it at a good price, snap it up, because I guarantee you will not be disappointed.
Steve, thank you very much indeed for reviewing those AV receiver and AV amplifier there. And one last thank you to the farmer. So Steve normally comes to us live and direct from his home. Today you're in a farm office, aren't you, Steve? Because somebody took out your home internet, someone further down the line, completely out of your control, and a very lovely neighbour has taken you in. So thank you very much to the farmer for letting you use the office.
My neighbour has come to my rescue on this one. And also quickly, going back to something that Ed said, contrary to what he said, I would not be buying 007 headphones or underpants for that matter.
So we'll strike those off your Christmas list then, Steve.
Yes, I'm not that big a fan.
That's good to know, because I nearly committed to buying the 007 underpants.
The headphones, there, I hope not.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all our experts today, and to you for all your support and watching all those videos. Again, if you missed anything today, never fear, because over the next day or so, all these articles will be going up to our YouTube channel and you can watch them at your leisure and as many times as you like. And thank you for doing that, because any minute now we are going to hit the 250,000 views. So thank you so much for your support. Sadly, we're out of time for this show. Don't worry, if you have any more questions, you can just head to the website and you can contact an expert in any of several ways. We've got live chat. You can book a call, a free call with one of our experts, and that allows you to really chat about your personalising the hi-fi kit. Because let's face it, the stuff we review, it's not cheap, because it's so good. So when you make that decision, you really want to get it right. So don't worry about contacting us, and book a call with Ed or Steve, Simon, or any of the experts you've seen on any of our shows, and they'll be very happy to chat with you. If you need help with your Christmas list, of course, then we will be back live in early December for more Sound Advice Live. And in the meantime, let us know what you would like to see featured on the next show. We'll see you then.